We are privileged this evening to have back with us author David Slade. He is known by some of you as a fiction author, The Christ Virus, and another book that he has out. But today we're going to talk about something that I think David is going to be a little different, which is a nonfiction book titled We Are the Last Generation. Thanks for being with us.
Privileged to be here, Brendan.
Well, we look forward to kind of finding out about your newest project. The title is one that caught my attention, as I got ready for our time together today. It says, We Are the Last Generation. I guess a great place to start is, why do you think we are the last generation?
Well, the book is really essentially a study in the Olivet Discourse. Okay. And when Jesus went to the temple shortly before he was crucified and resurrected, the disciples with him were talking about how great the temple was. And Jesus made this incredibly profound and disturbing statement that I tell you that not one stone will be left upon another. Mm-hmm. So when they got back to the Mount of Olives, which is opposite the temple over there, 4 of his disciples, James and John and Peter and Andrew, came to him and asked him 3 questions. And basically, when will these things be? What will be signs of your coming? What will be the sign of the end of the age? And so in response to that, he gave them 14 replies. The first 6 dealt with earthquakes and pestilences and all these things. The next 7 dealt with specifically the church, persecution, deception, betrayal. And the last one is a key one. It is in Matthew 24:12, which says that when the gospel's been preached to all nations, then the end will come. Mm-hmm. And offset, we were just talking about this. And that is that Alumni Nations, which is a coalition of almost 100 Bible translators, says that the gospel will be translated into all remaining languages, which is about 3,200 to 3,400 now, by 2033.
So let's just stop right there and say, well, from where we sit today, that would be less than a decade out. Yep. That's been a work that Bible translators have really pursued aggressively for decades. But it could be, and AI is helping in that, correct?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
That could close the gap within a decade. Okay,
absolutely.
Keep going.
And there's another interesting correlation to this, and that is in the Dead Sea Scrolls. The Melchizedek scroll was a calendar, and it was an elaborate calendar based on the sun by the Essenes. The Essenes are believed to be the authors of the Dead Sea Scrolls or the Qumran scrolls. And in it, they predict that the end of the age will be 2075, and that 2025 begins the last 50 years of the Jubilee, which essentially means that everything in Matthew 24 will happen within the next 24 years. It'll accelerate. Obviously, many things have already happened, but what we're going to see now is an acceleration. So that's another interesting piece to that. And then one other thing that is fascinating that really tells us where we are prophetically is Revelation 16, the bowl judgments. The bowl judgments, 4 of the 6 judgments there, deal with extreme heat, where men are cursing God because they're being scorched by the sun. Yep. Mm-hmm. All of the fish in the sea die. All the fish in the rivers die. And the great Euphrates River dries up. Well, did you know that the Middle East News Agency just recently predicted that the Euphrates River will be dry by 2040? And wow. So
I did not know that.
That gives me, just little tingles here talking about that is part of the tribulation, and that they are predicting that parts of it will be completely dry. Also, the last 10 years have been the hottest 10 years on record, 2024 being the hottest year. Phoenix had 143 days over 100 degrees, 70 days over 110 degrees. And so everything is heating up everywhere, and it points toward the fulfillment of these bowl judgments. So we have a context when we look at where we are with the gospel being completed, when we look at judgments that are coming, that we already see the groundwork laid for those. I think it's safe to say that we are the last generation.
Okay, so when we think about, you've hit some keys about the prophetic calendar and where you think that we are on that prophetic calendar. I think the question that a lot of believers ask is, well, but what about the rapture? Does anything need to happen before the rapture takes place? From your studies, what's your thought?
Well, I believe that the gospel has to be completed before the rapture, and here's why. Because of the remaining tribes out there, and Jesus said nations. He said when the gospel's preached to all nations. Well, nations didn't really exist until about the 16th century. The word that's used in Greek is ethnos, and ethnos means tribes. And there are about 7,200 languages in the world today. Of those, there's about 32 to 3,400 that have not been translated. Of those, 70% are spoken only. But as you said, AI and technology is speeding up the translation of the gospel. But here's the question to ask. If the rapture were to happen today, who would finish the job of translating the Bible? I mean, millions and millions of dollars are poured into that, and I can't believe that the remaining people on earth are going to contribute to the translation of the gospel. So that work would go unfinished. Would God then send millions of people into the tribulation without having the opportunity to have heard the gospel? So from my perspective, I believe that this must be fulfilled. It really is the last thing that has to be fulfilled before the rapture.
What do you think are some of the challenges that Christians are going to be facing over the course of the next few years? If you believe that this is the last generation and that the clock's running out, what do you think that the challenges that the church, that Christians are going to face?
Well, Jesus told us. He said that in the latter days, we are going to be facing, it'll be a time of great deception, and it'll be a time of betrayal and persecution. And already we see the rise of anti-Semitism and persecution against the church at levels not seen since the Holocaust, since World War II. In Europe, I live over in Europe, and over there we're seeing the effects of anti-Semitism all over the place. And so it's a real problem, and the same thing here, because the war with Israel and Hamas has just kind of ignited this hatred toward Jews and toward Christians. So I think we're going to face a lot more persecution, and I think that home fellowships are going to be incredibly important, because we may see laws passed in the future that are going to make it difficult for churches.
You made a statement earlier about Jesus' discourse in Matthew 25, and one of the statements talks about the fact that, as things were in the days of Noah, it's going to be in those days as well. Why don't you go into that just a little bit before we run out of time? Yeah,
that's a big one. Well, on the surface, basically people were apathetic. Here was Noah building this enormous ark that people have never seen before, because they didn't have oceans and things like that we have in that particular area. And so I'm sure people mocked him and thought he was a fool, and yet Peter said that he was a man of righteousness, and he preached the gospel during that time. But on a different level, there is Genesis 6:2 to deal with. And this is a very controversial scripture in the Bible, but what it deals with essentially in a nutshell is that the sons of God, which are angels, came down to earth, had relationships with women, produced a hybrid race called the Nephilim. And
which are referenced several times in Scripture.
It is referenced in Jude, who wrote that, referenced by Peter. And it's a lot of teachers now are coming around to this view that this is what it says. And one of the books discovered in the Dead Sea Scrolls is the Book of Enoch. And the Book of Enoch was almost like a history book that was read quite a bit, and it goes into quite a lot of detail about this. So there's a lot of speculation that what is ongoing right now in the humanism and that is happening right now, and the ability to meld AI and humans to create something new, we're on the verge of that. And the military is doing a lot of research right now to be able to combine AI and humans to create something new. And so I think this whole concept of a hybrid which we saw in Genesis 6:2. I think we're on the verge of that.
Well, today we've been talking to Dave Slade, who is the author, and there's information about how to find his book on the screen called We Are the Last Generation, and talking about some very interesting concepts. Dave, we appreciate you coming back all the way from Europe to share with us.
What a privilege
It's been a
to be here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brenton.